Well, it's been 10 years since medical cannabis was legalised here in Australia, but we've made very little progress in making it easily available for those who need it. So, why has there been a lack of progress? To find out, I'm joined by Dr. Kylie O'Brien, who was previously on the TGA's advisory committee for complementary medicine and now works as a consultant in the field. Kylie, welcome to McKnight Tonight.
Hi, Rob. Pleased to be here.
Look, good to have you here. Medical cannabis was legalised in 2016 but remains unapproved. What does that mean?
So it's legal with a doctor's prescription, but the TGA considers most medicinal cannabis products unapproved, which means it hasn't assessed them for safety and efficacy. Now, there are two exceptions here. These are registered drugs available on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. One is a high cannabidiol product, and the other one is a combination of cannabidiol and tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. So they're drugs available on prescription already as any other pharmaceutical. But the rest of the cannabis products in Australia, you have to get them on prescription, but they are considered unapproved goods. So that's
but
effect.
This has been legalised since 2016.
It has.
Why hasn't the TGA been going through the process of getting them approved?
So any company theoretically could apply to have their product approved, but they have to go through the same process as a pharmaceutical. They have to have clinical trial evidence of efficacy and safety. And most of the companies in Australia haven't done that research on their products.
Why?
I'd say it comes down to money. Running clinical trials is very expensive. So that's probably a big part of it.
Sure. But is that fair enough, though? If they're giving a product to people, isn't it fair enough that tests are run to see whether it works or not?
Oh, look, I think there's a definite argument. If you're going to argue that your product is special, then you should do the research on it. But having said that, there's been many studies of medicinal cannabis broadly, as well as certain specific products. And so there is an evidence base that some of them work for certain conditions, but not all conditions. So I suppose, broadly speaking, we can say that there's evidence for certain types of medicinal cannabis products like CBD, cannabidiol, working in some people and in some conditions, as well as other types of medicines working for other conditions, broadly speaking. But if you're going to, I suppose, talk about a specific medicine, then, we don't have that data for most of the products in Australia.
Explain to me, you mentioned that it's not like a normal prescription. So how do patients access medicinal cannabis?
Good question. So they have to have it prescribed by a doctor, but a doctor has to go through one of two different schemes to be able to prescribe it. So one is called the Special Access Scheme B, and that's a common one that doctors use. And that means that when a patient comes into their clinic, then they have to apply to the Therapeutic Goods Administration to get approval for that patient, for that medicine or type of medicine, and for that particular condition.
Is that like when someone gets Ritalin, how they have to call through and get approval for that?
Not quite. I don't think so. But the other way that doctors can prescribe is they become authorised prescribers of medicinal cannabis, and it's a two-step process. So they have to apply to an ethics committee or a specialist college to get approved there, and then they send their application to the TGA, and the TGA gives the final approval. So under that scheme, it means when a patient comes in, if that doctor's already been approved to prescribe particular types of cannabis medicines for particular conditions, and that patient has one of those conditions that they're approved to prescribe for, then they can simply write the prescription.
Gotcha.
So they don't have to upload the data to the TGA every time the patient comes in. They can just write the prescription. But then the prescription must be filled by a pharmacy.
Okay. So, what are the benefits of medicinal cannabis over other medicines?
That's a really good question. And I think that not enough research has been done comparing it to other medicines that are already on the market. Now, in Australia, the TGA doesn't see medicinal cannabis as a first-line treatment. Doctors are supposed to ensure that patients have tried other medications before they prescribe medicinal cannabis.
You mentioned that only two medicines have been registered.
Mhm.
Does that mean, and you talked about the expense of it, so is the current model fit for purpose?
Look, I think it's not. And I think in their defence, the TGA probably didn't realise that there would be so many people eventually being prescribed medicinal cannabis. Back in 2016, only a small number of people were prescribed it. But now, I suppose if you look at figures in, say, 2025, there are about 222,000 approvals under the Special Access Scheme B in that year. So every year, the number of approvals or applications to have cannabis approved for patients is increasing. So really, since 2016, there's been over 530,000 approvals, and that's just the Special Access Scheme B. That's not counting prescriptions that have been written under the Authorised Prescriber Scheme. So I think, to answer your question, it's probably not fit for purpose now because the numbers have just grown so big. And the TGA did have a review last year in October. It sent out a consultation paper widely to industry, and they had over 700 responses. People and companies put in their responses to the discussion questions. And I think overwhelmingly, the feedback from that consultation process is that it's now not fit for purpose, our regulatory sort of setup for it. But there is concern that if there are changes, that it shouldn't impact on patient access.
It's interesting because that we talk about not being fit for purpose, because my understanding is that a number of people in the industry maintain that the government was disingenuous regarding its commitment to medical cannabis. And as a result, a number of companies that were established to manufacture
Right.
it, they've actually lost millions of dollars. So what does that do to the market and the willingness of other companies to take a gamble on a product that hasn't been fully embraced by the government?
Yes, look, it's a tough industry, the cannabis industry, and a number of companies have gone under. It's a difficult space to be in. So look, I really can't comment on what you've just said, though. I simply don't know.
Okay, fair enough. But you compare us to other countries like the US, where medicinal cannabis seems freely available. Should that be the case here in Australia? I mean, it just seems to me, and I'm not a scientist, but I've seen a lot of things that it offers a lot of people relief,
Yeah.
um, especially when it comes to pain relief on a day-to-day basis when you can't just be dosed up on morphine all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are we falling behind? What I just don't understand why a conservative country like America, which,
Mm.
in all respects is a lot more conservative than Australia,
Yes.
has, it's essentially available everywhere in a lot of states. But in
Yes.
Australia, it just doesn't seem to be a thing. Yes, people can jump the hurdles and get it, but it's not freely available.
You're right. It's easier in the United States. I think there's at the moment 42 states and the District of Columbia plus a couple of other smaller islands. They have legalized medical cannabis, and you need a doctor's recommendation, and then you get a medical marijuana card Now, each state has got a list, my understanding anyway, a list of conditions. And if you have one of those conditions, you've got a doctor's recommendation, then you can get a medical marijuana card, and then you can go into a dispensary to get your cannabis medicines. So,
Of course, there's always the joke, isn't there? Like in California, everyone has a marijuana card.
possibly. And look, there's over 20 states now in the US that have legalized adult use as well. So I'd say, even though, US is often very conservative, perhaps they're not as conservative, but it's still federally, it's still a Schedule 1 drug. So, the states just do something different to what the federal legislation is. So they've got their own sort of problems over there as well, I think.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned you were on the TGA's advisory committee for complementary medicine. So you've been on the inside. What is the resistance to medicinal cannabis?
Well, the advisory committee for complementary medicine's got nothing to do with cannabis. It belongs under a different sort of section. So I don't know.
Yes, but you've been inside the machine.
I have been inside the machine. I don't know. I think, that there probably is conservatism. I still think there's a lot of misunderstanding about medicinal cannabis, and that can be, sort of broadly across government. I don't think that, I can't sort of see that they've got a reason to stop it on purpose, but I think governments are slow to change. And I think, as I said, they at least did the right thing by legalising it in 2016, but I think the structure they set up really, I don't think they realised it was going to get this big.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Dr. Kylie O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us on tonight. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.